I used to think relationships fell apart in big, dramatic ways, cheating scandals, explosive arguments, slammed doors. But that's not how mine started to crumble. It began with a single sentence. 7 words that shifted something deep inside me, like a hairline fracture splitting into a fault line. I'm going to stay with my ex for a month. She said it like she was announcing a weekend getaway. Calm. Casual. No emotion in her voice, no tremble in her hands. She was already halfway done packing. A small suitcase sat by the door. Her phone buzzed with a message. I saw the name, even if she tried to tilt the screen away. Dylan. I didn't say anything right away. I think part of me froze, not out of shock, but out of something quieter. Something heavier. I stood there, coffee cup in hand, watching the steam rise and disappear, wondering when the woman I married had decided that this kind of sentence could be said out loud like it was no big deal. You're not upset? She asked, after a few seconds. I looked up. Should I be? She shrugged. I just thought, you'd at least have something to say. But I didn't. Not really. What do you say to someone who's already made their choice? Her name is Lila. We've been married for almost 6 years. We met in a bookstore. Yeah, a cliché. I know, but back then she felt like everything I never knew I needed. She had this brightness to her, this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. We built a life together, slowly, thoughtfully, intentionally. Or at least I thought we did. Now, I realize I may have built it alone, and she just walked beside it, waiting for the next detour. The thing is, this wasn't totally out of nowhere. The signs were subtle at first. The text she didn't answer in front of me. The weekends with friends where she came home more distant. The random silences over dinner. I kept telling myself it was stress, work, hormones, anything but the truth. But deep down, I knew. Still, I never expected her to say it out loud. Not with such clarity. Not without a fight. And definitely not with a suitcase already packed. She told me she needed time. Space. That she was feeling lost, and that Dylan, her ex from college, was someone she could talk to during this time. She insisted it wasn't about rekindling anything romantic, that it was just about reflection. I just need to figure out who I am again, she said. But here's the thing, I wasn't stopping her. Not because I agreed with it, but because I wasn't about to hold on to someone who had already emotionally let go. Sometimes, letting someone walk out is the only way to find out who they truly are, and who you truly are without them. So, I didn't argue. I opened the door. She hesitated, just for a second. I don't know if she expected me to beg or plead, or maybe she thought I'd lose my temper and explode. But I didn't. I just gave her a small nod, and then I walked away. No final kiss. No goodbye. Just silence. And that's when it hit me, not just what was happening, but how much I had changed. A year ago, I would have panicked. I would have clung to her, desperate to hold on. But now, I just stood in the kitchen, watching the front door slowly close, and I felt empty. But not broken. I knew this was the start of something. I just didn't know what yet. But I would find out. And so would she. The door closed so softly behind her it didn't even click. I remember just standing there in the hallway, staring at the spot where she'd been moments earlier. There wasn't a trace of perfume left in the air. No sound of keys, no hesitation, no final look over her shoulder. That was it. One sentence, one bag, one ride to somewhere I wasn't invited. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't eat, either. Not because I was wallowing or falling apart. I just couldn't shake the feeling that something about this wasn't what it seemed. She was too calm, too put together. That's not how people act when they're trying to find themselves. That's how people act when they've already decided where they're going. But I wasn't about to become the guy who stalks her social media or drives by the address I already knew she went to. I made a promise to myself that night. I wasn't going to chase anyone, not even her. Instead, I went back into our bedroom, which still smelled faintly like the lavender lotion she used to leave on her nightstand, and I started pulling open drawers. I didn't know why. I wasn't looking for evidence or some smoking gun. I think I just wanted to feel connected to something real. But what I found surprised me. There were things missing. Not a lot, but enough. A favorite sweater, her old camera, a pair of earrings I bought her in Maine 3 years ago. Nothing she would need for just a 1-month stay with a friend, let alone an ex. It was like she had packed for a possibility. Like she didn't know if she was coming back. And yet, she hadn't called it a separation. Not once. She didn't say we were breaking up. She didn't say divorce. It was, I need time, and I need to feel who I was before all this. All this. All what? That part kept echoing in my head. Like our life together had somehow become some kind of burden she hadn't signed up for. We weren't perfect. God knows, I had my flaws. I buried myself in work when I got overwhelmed. I shut down emotionally when things got too heavy. But I never once imagined that she'd look at our life and see it as something she needed to escape. I tried to distract myself. I went to work. I walked around the lake every evening. I even started journaling, something I hadn't done since high school. But every time I sat still long enough, her absence became its own kind of presence. And I started noticing something strange in the quiet moments. This tension in my chest that didn't feel like heartbreak. It felt like anticipation, not of her return, but of something else, something I couldn't name yet. And then, on the 8th night after she left, around midnight, my phone buzzed. It wasn't a message. It was a calendar notification. Something she must have set weeks ago, maybe even months ago. It simply read, "Dinner with Dylan, 7 p.m., Riverstone House." Riverstone House wasn't a restaurant. It was a boutique rental home 2 hours out of town, tucked away in the hills. She'd mentioned it once in passing, said it had a view that looked like a painting. And now, apparently, she had a reservation there. With him. I stared at the screen, not angry, not jealous, not hurt, just still, like I was finally beginning to understand that this wasn't about a break. This was about a choice. And maybe, just maybe, I had a choice, too. It's strange how quickly you begin to fill in someone's silence. I used to think that space between words meant confusion or hesitation, but now I realize it can mean something far worse, certainty. The quiet between us wasn't accidental anymore. It was chosen. And what scared me most wasn't that she might not come back, but that maybe she already knew she wouldn't. I didn't try to contact her after the Riverstone House reminder. I didn't even open her social media, if she even still used it. I didn't ask her sister, didn't text her coworkers. I just existed. But even in that stillness, things started to crack. People noticed. At work, my assistant asked if everything was okay. I said yes, and she nodded politely, but I saw the look in her eyes. That hesitant concern. That subtle sadness. My mom called and said she had a dream about me as a kid, sitting alone on the porch in the rain. I smiled and told her I was fine. She didn't believe me. But here's the part no one prepares you for. When your partner leaves, physically or emotionally, the world doesn't collapse. Your house doesn't crumble. Your job doesn't disappear. Groceries still need buying. Laundry still piles up. You still get spam calls about your car's warranty. Life doesn't care that your heart is walking around outside your chest. It just keeps going. And in that continuation, I started noticing the small things. Her robe still hanging behind the bathroom door. A mug with faded lipstick on the rim. Her side of the closet still mostly full, like it was waiting for a return that might never happen. But the oddest part? I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel rage or bitterness or the need to throw everything out. I just felt like I was standing in a version of my life that had already moved on without telling me. I started walking longer in the evenings. There was this park by the edge of town. Nothing special, just a winding trail around a duck pond, but it became my space. No phones, no earbuds, just thoughts. And that's when I started talking out loud. Not to anyone, just to myself. Processing things I never said before. Things I was too afraid to feel in the moment. One evening, maybe 2 weeks after she left, I stood under this crooked oak tree near the trail's bend and said out loud, "I don't think I miss her. I think I miss the version of her I believed in." It was the first time I'd admitted it, even to myself. Because the truth is, I couldn't quite remember the last time we'd laughed together. I couldn't remember the last time she reached for my hand without me reaching first. I couldn't remember a single night in the last year where she looked at me like she wanted to be there, not just out of obligation or routine or memory, but out of choice. And maybe, just maybe, she'd been gone long before she ever packed her suitcase. The realization hit quietly, like waking up from a dream that felt too real. Not painful, not even disappointing, just clear. And in that clarity, something inside me shifted. I started looking at our home differently. It didn't feel like a shared space anymore. It felt like mine. It didn't echo with absence. It echoed with potential. I didn't know what I was going to do next. I wasn't making any declarations or decisions. I wasn't planning revenge or hoping for a dramatic return. I just knew that whatever version of myself I was becoming, he felt more grounded than the one who watched her walk out. I didn't want the old life back. I wanted to know what came after. And the strangest part? I felt okay with not knowing yet. There's something surreal about hearing your own footsteps echo through a house that used to hum with two people's lives. I'd come home from work and open the door like a stranger, quiet, cautious, almost afraid to disturb whatever ghost version of my marriage still lingered in the walls. I stopped turning on the TV, stopped playing music in the background. For the first time in years, I let the silence stay, and it taught me things I hadn't been willing to learn. One evening, around the third week after she left, I sat at our kitchen counter eating reheated pasta from a plastic container. The same pasta I used to make for both of us on Tuesday nights. Her favorite, or so I thought. I couldn't even taste it anymore. Not because it was bad, but because I realized how many things I had done out of habit, not connection. Tuesday pasta. Thursday movie night. Weekend laundry. We were choreographed. Predictable. Quietly drifting while calling it stability. And that's when it hit me. I think I'd been afraid to ask her if she was happy because I already knew the answer. And maybe she was just as afraid to ask me. The idea of Dylan didn't bother me anymore. Not because I forgave her, but because I started to see him for what he really was. An excuse. A door. Maybe a fantasy. But not the problem. People don't leave homes they love for just a fling. They leave because something inside them no longer feels at home. And as hard as it was to accept, I started to wonder if she had felt more alone next to me than she ever did with him. I didn't hate her for it. I didn't even blame her. I just hated that we let it get this far without ever daring to look each other in the eye and admit it. There's this little antique shop I used to pass on my walk to the park. I'd never gone in before. It always looked cluttered and uninviting, like a forgotten memory trapped in time. But one rainy Friday afternoon, with nothing but thoughts bouncing around my head, I stepped inside. There was an older woman at the counter, surrounded by clocks, dozens of them, all ticking at slightly different speeds. The sound was chaotic at first, but then oddly soothing. She greeted me kindly and asked if I was looking for anything in particular. I said no, just browsing. But then I saw it. A tiny wooden frame with a quote etched in the bottom corner. You can't lose something that was never really yours. I don't know why it hit me so hard. Maybe because I had spent weeks telling myself I had lost her. That she was stolen. That she drifted. But maybe she had never fully been mine to begin with. Not in the way I thought. Maybe I loved the version of her I wanted her to be. Maybe she loved the idea of who I was supposed to become. We both played roles. We both clung to comfort. And in doing so, we missed the moment when love stopped feeling like home and started feeling like performance. I bought the frame, took it home, put it on the shelf beside a dusty vase she once insisted on keeping even though it had a chip on the side. I didn't throw the vase out. I didn't smash it in frustration. I just let it sit there, quietly flawed and still part of the room, like everything else we left behind. Later that night, I did something unexpected. I wrote her an email. Not to win her back. Not to ask questions or give answers. I just told her what I'd been thinking. I told her about the silence. About the pasta. About the antique shop and the clocks. I told her that I wasn't angry, but I was sad. Not just for us, but for how we never dared to be honest with each other when it actually mattered. I didn't hit send. Not yet. But for the first time, I felt like I was speaking. Not pretending. Not performing. Just speaking. And that's when I realized I was finally learning how to live with myself again. Even if she never came back. There's this moment I kept replaying in my head, not because it mattered, but because I never really noticed it before. It was a Wednesday, maybe 2 months ago. She came home from work and set her keys down harder than usual. I asked if something was wrong, and she smiled. Not the kind of smile that means I'm okay, but the kind that says, please stop asking. She said she was just tired, and I nodded. I remember that now because I realize I didn't press. I let the moment pass. Like so many others, I stopped asking follow-up questions because I was afraid of the answers. We'd become polite strangers in matching bathrobes, operating in the same space with different emotional time zones. I think that scared me more than her sleeping in someone else's bed ever could. At least betrayal is honest in its own way. Emotional absence is quieter, more dangerous. You don't see it leave. You just wake up one day and realize it's been gone for months. That night, I found myself doing something unexpected. I opened a blank document on my laptop and started writing down what I remembered about her. Not facts. Not things like her birthday or the name of her favorite movie. But moments. Sounds. The way her laugh used to interrupt itself with a gasp. The way her fingers danced across the dashboard when she liked a song. The way she talked to dogs in a higher pitch like they were toddlers. I didn't write any of it with nostalgia. I wrote it like I was filing away the final details of someone I used to know. The next morning, I made coffee, sat at the kitchen counter again, and reread the email I never sent her. I didn't change a single word. And then, without ceremony, I deleted it. Not because I was angry, not because I changed my mind, but because I realized I didn't need her to read it to make it real. I already said what I needed to out loud in my head, in writing. What she did with her silence wasn't my burden to carry anymore. That was the first time I walked into the bedroom and didn't notice the empty half of the bed. It was just a bed, a place to rest, not a battlefield. Over the next few days, something odd happened. I started sleeping better. Not longer, just better. Not deep sleep, not yet. But my dreams started changing. They weren't about her. They weren't about arguments or regret. I dreamed about old friends I hadn't seen in years. I dreamt about driving aimlessly through cities I'd never visited. I woke up with the kind of confusion that feels almost peaceful, like your brain is finally cleaning the shelves. I got a message from her mom 2 days later. She said Lila was doing okay, that she was figuring things out, that she'd asked her not to get involved, but she wanted me to know she hoped I was doing all right too. I thanked her. Nothing more. I wasn't looking for updates. I didn't ask where she was or what figuring things out meant. I didn't want secondhand truth. I wanted my own. And that's when I realized something nobody tells you when a relationship falls apart. Sometimes, the healing doesn't come from the other person's apology or their explanation, or even their return. It comes from learning to hear your own voice again after years of tuning it out to make room for someone else's comfort. I went to the park that evening, the one with the crooked tree and the uneven bench, and I sat longer than usual. I didn't bring a book. I didn't bring a phone. I just sat and watched people live. Couples walking dogs. Kids chasing each other with wild, reckless joy. A man feeding squirrels with crumbs from his sandwich. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was missing something. I didn't feel like someone had stolen part of me. I felt like I had stopped giving pieces away for free. The strange thing about grief is that it doesn't always show up as sadness. Sometimes it shows up as stillness. Sometimes it looks like brushing your teeth without staring at yourself in the mirror. Or folding your laundry with music on again. Or realizing you laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks, and it wasn't forced. I didn't know what Lila would do next. Maybe she'd come back. Maybe she wouldn't. But I knew this. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was living. I wasn't expecting the call. Truth is, by then, I'd stopped expecting anything at all. It had been just over 4 weeks since she left, and the rhythm of life had quietly settled into something I could almost call normal. Not healed. Not better. But bearable. The coffee brewed without her mug next to mine. The fridge didn't echo with leftovers we never ate together. The house had finally stopped feeling like a paused conversation and more like a sentence I was finishing on my own terms. I was folding laundry, something she used to do, even though I always offered, when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Maybe curiosity. Maybe some strange obligation to closure. It was her voice. Softer than I remembered. More tentative. Not fragile. Lila was never fragile, but uncertain in a way I hadn't heard since before we got married. Hey, she said, like we were picking up a casual thread. Are you home? There was no apology. No small talk. No asking how I'd been. Just that one question. I am, I said, my voice calm, even. Why? She paused. A long pause. And then she said, I don't know. I guess I just needed to hear your voice. I didn't say anything at first. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't trust the silence on her end. It wasn't the same silence we used to share, the kind that settled in after an argument or filled the space between distracted dinners. This one felt more like a fishing line, cast out to see if there was still something on the other end. You sound different, she said finally. I smiled at that. Not because it was funny, but because it was true. I probably am, I said. She didn't ask why. I don't think she wanted the answer. Or maybe she already knew. Maybe she'd sensed at the moment I didn't try to stop her from walking out the door. Maybe she had been waiting for this version of me to crack, to come undone, to plead. But that never happened. I think part of her wanted me to need her more than she needed me. And now, maybe for the first time, she realized I didn't. She told me she was still at Dylan's. She said it like a confession, but also like a test, waiting to see how I'd react. I didn't react. Not in the way she expected. Okay, I said. Another pause. I haven't unpacked everything, she added quickly, as if to soften the blow. It's not permanent. I looked out the window. The sun was hitting the side of the neighbor's fence just right, casting this soft golden glow across our lawn. I realized I hadn't noticed something so simple in weeks. It felt good. You don't need to explain anything, I said, and I meant it. She went quiet again, then finally asked, Do you hate me? No, I said, but I don't think I've ever understood you less. That landed harder than I expected. I heard her breath catch for just a second, and in that moment, I realized I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was just being honest. For once. I thought space would help me figure things out, she said, but all it did was make me feel smaller. I didn't know what to say to that, because part of me wondered if she had always felt that way with me. If I'd been part of the shrinking, not the growing. And if that was true, then maybe neither of us was to blame, but both of us were responsible. She said she might come by sometime to pick up a few things. I told her I'd leave them by the door. Not out of coldness. Out of respect. I didn't want a dramatic reunion or an emotionally charged confrontation. I just wanted clarity on both sides. We said goodbye. And when the call ended, I didn't feel wrecked. I didn't feel relief either. Just stillness. A clean space where something else, something entirely mine, might finally begin. 2 days after the phone call, I found myself walking through the house differently. Not searching. Not sulking. Just looking, really looking, at what remained. It's strange how things become louder after someone's absence stretches long enough. Not in a dramatic, haunting way. In a subtle, matter-of-fact sort of way. Like the old cardigan she'd stopped wearing but never threw out. The one with the frayed sleeves tucked behind a stack of towels. The mug from Santa Fe, chipped but sacred. A paperback novel she never finished, still resting on page 113. A single sandal under the bed, its twin nowhere to be found. These weren't just forgotten objects. They were fragments of a life paused mid-sentence. I didn't move them. I didn't pack anything up. I just sat with them. Observed them. Let them exist without rearranging or assigning meaning. It wasn't about nostalgia or loss. It was about learning to coexist with a version of the past that didn't require me to edit it. That same evening, I opened the closet not to clean it out, but to stand inside it. To stand in the space where we used to meet each morning, half-dressed and half-distracted, talking over each other while pretending not to listen. I closed the door and stood in the dark with the scent of old perfume and cedar hangers. And for the first time since she left, I spoke her name out loud. Not to call her back. Not to mourn. Just to remind myself that she was real, and that what we had was real, even if it ended quietly. There's a very specific kind of grief that comes with the absence of final words. You don't get the clean wound. You get the slow unraveling. And there's no audience. No friends checking in daily. No casseroles. Just subtle questions from coworkers and an echo in your head asking, was it something I missed? Or was it always going to end this way? I used to think I needed a clear reason. I thought clarity would be the thing that would let me move on. But now I understand something else. The reason doesn't come from them. It never did. It comes from accepting that people change in ways we don't see until they're already gone. And by then, it's not about undoing anything. It's about letting it stay undone. A week passed without another call from her. I didn't expect one. But late Friday night, as I was closing the kitchen window, I saw headlights slow down in front of the house. A familiar car. She didn't park. She didn't come to the door. She just sat there. For what must have been 5 minutes. Then drove off. No message. No knock. Just a glimpse of what might have been uncertainty or guilt or hesitation. I didn't step outside. I didn't wave. I just stood there, letting the moment pass like a car on the freeway. Visible, real, and already gone. And that's when it became clear. This wasn't a break. This was a shift. Not between us, but within me. I no longer waited to see what she would do next. I no longer filtered my days through the question of whether she'd return. The chapter had ended, not with a slammed door, but with a quiet exhale. And for the first time in what felt like years, I had no desire to reopen it. That night, I lay in bed and let the silence stretch. No distractions. No replays of old conversations. Just the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the steady rhythm of my breath. Unshared, uninterrupted, fully mine. The following Sunday morning was unusually bright. Not just sunny, but warm in that effortless, early spring kind of way. The kind that opens windows and quiets everything inside you. I had nowhere to be, no one waiting, and for the first time in a long while, that didn't feel empty. It felt clean. I brewed coffee, not because I needed it, but because I liked the ritual. I let it sit a little too long before pouring it, then carried it to the front steps and sat there barefoot, feeling the wood still cool from the night. I didn't check my phone. I didn't think about her. I didn't imagine what Dylan's kitchen looked like or whether she still used the Santa Fe mug. I just watched the street breathe, a jogger passing by, a neighbor pruning hedges, the mail truck slowing at each box like it had nowhere better to be. There was peace in that pace. When I went inside, I pulled out an old storage bin I hadn't touched in years. Inside were things from before her, sketches I never finished, a short story I started the year before we met, a photograph of my brother and me building a treehouse we never finished. All these little undone things, frozen in time, waiting for space. And suddenly, I had it. Not because she gave it to me, but because I stopped needing her permission to exist in it. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. No email from her. No apology. No explanation. I didn't want one. But I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I opened a new document and started writing. Not about her. Not about what went wrong. I wrote a story that had nothing to do with the past. Something about a man in a quiet town who repaired clocks and always knew the time, even when everyone else forgot it. It wasn't good, but it felt good. And I kept going. That afternoon, I texted an old friend I hadn't seen in 2 years. I asked if he wanted to grab lunch sometime soon. He responded in under a minute. Absolutely. Been meaning to text you for months. I'm glad you reached out. That's the thing about life. It never stops offering you new moments to start over. You just have to notice them. Over the next few weeks, I rearranged the house. Not drastically, just enough to make it mine. I moved the bookshelves out of the bedroom. I donated the dinnerware set we never used. I bought a plant I wasn't sure I'd keep alive. And every time I walked into a room, it felt a little more like I belonged there. One evening, just before sunset, I walked past the closet again. Her things were still there. I hadn't touched them, hadn't boxed them, hadn't rushed the process. But this time, I opened the door, took a breath, and began folding. Not out of anger. Not because I wanted the space, but because I had already made space inside myself for something new. And it was time to let the rest catch up. I didn't hear from her again. Maybe one day I will. Maybe I won't. But either way, I'm okay. Because I'm not waiting anymore. Not for a message. Not for closure. Not for permission to move on. I'm living. Fully. Finally. And quietly, joyfully whole.